Okay.
Maybe bad.
So, hi everybody. Today is March 3rd, 2012, 9th of Adar, 5772. And thank you for coming to the very exciting first class about Mussar, which we'll talk about today. Before we start, let's say the blessing for studying Torah. I'm going to look over your shoulder, Barbara, because I didn't make enough copies. Let's share this one. So let's say it together in Hebrew and then in English. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah v'ha'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratecha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael v'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzaenu v'tze'etza'ei amcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha v'lumdei Toratecha lishma Baruch atah Adonai Hamlamed Torah le'amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the world, who sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Please, Adonai, our God, make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of your people, the house of Israel, that we and our descendants and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, all of us, knowers of your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to his people, Israel. So this is a very exciting class for me. I said the same thing last week about the Siddur class. This is going to be very different. This is a practice workshop for reasons we'll talk about. And today won't be so much of a workshop because we need to. It's a hands-on thing, and you haven't yet read the first hands-on material. And I want to lay the foundation. Because we're going to say some, I'm going to start by saying some, or not start at the very beginning, but soon I'll say some strange things that I want to have backup for you to see that I haven't just pulled it out of left field. But I thought as an introduction I would start with something personal, very briefly about why I went to rabbinical school. Because it ties why I went to rabbinical school, why I wanted to become a rabbi. It ties directly into this class. So, as you know, I had studied graduate school law and history, and I decided I wanted to go back to school. And the logical sort of thing would have been to get a master's degree in Jewish studies. That was a lot easier, less time intensive, more places I could go. I could do it at night, a lot cheaper, shorter, a lot of reasons. But I had studied the academic side of everything, in law and history and other things. And I wanted to really explore or develop what I thought was very deficient about one of the things about myself, which was my spiritual side. I just didn't have really any training in that. So that was a reason why I wanted to become a rabbi, because I thought that rabbis had the spiritual aspect to that. But I didn't really know what that meant per se. So I started in rabbinical school, and to my surprise, one of the first things that I learned was that we would be required to participate every week in what was called a spiritual development class, which wasn't intentional on my part, to go there, but it was right in line, as I said, with what I was doing. So what did this mean? This meant that we were divided into groups of, I think we had 8 students, and we met every week on this thing called Mussar, which I'd never heard of. And so for 5 years, I was in a Mussar program group, and not only in this class, but we had visiting lectures and so forth, including the head of the Mussar Institute. What's a Mussar? Okay, yeah, good question. We'll get there in a moment. And since then, I attended a convention near Chicago, and have had private chavruta partnership with another rabbi on the East Coast, and I've been hoping for an opportunity to get back involved. So this is exciting. Okay, so that's a fair question. So what exactly is this thing, Mussar? I'll just tell you right out, the modern Hebrew translation of that is ethics. But that's misleading. It's really not ethics per se. I think a better word for it is virtues. And you'll see it is the reason that I say that. But to sort of give you a lead-in, those of you who were here last week, I asked a question about what is a human being. And we came up with an answer that we are souls. Okay, so souls with bodies, not bodies with souls. So you may have heard the words neshama, or ruach, or nefesh. All these are words that have to do with this idea of a soul. The neshama is sometimes translated as the pure essence within us that cannot be tainted or dimmed or anything. It's the spark of divinity, some say. The ruach is the kind of the living spirit, the energy, the life force within us. And the nefesh is all of our personality traits and characteristics and so forth. Why is this relevant? Because the basic command in Torah, which we talked about last week also, is to be holy. And what does that mean? Holy, and we talked about kadosh, and kodesh, and all these words that have the same theme, and they all have to do with separating something, the holy from the mundane. So if we're souls, how do we separate ourselves, or how do we make our souls elevated? And that is really, I think, what Mussar is about. It's not a self-help idea. It's more about getting our souls elevated so we're living life on a higher plane, and this light within us, if I can be a little metaphorical, shines through to other people. One analogy that I heard once was that our neshama, our innermost soul, is like a light of a lighthouse. And you have a brand new lighthouse with perfectly clear lenses. Well, then through storms, salt and schmutz accumulates on the lenses and it doesn't shine very brightly anymore. And so our job is to clean off those lenses and allow our inner lights to shine on others and be who we are. So that's all very esoteric.
Yes.
Mussar is very practical, as we'll see, but it's good to have a little spiritual sense.
So is that the same as us being the best we can?
Being the best you can, yes.
We're capable of.
Sure, you could say that, the best you can. But what does that really mean? I mean, that's a conceptual idea. But yes, how do we actually become the best we can?
Right.
So I started out by saying that I was going to say some strange things, and I wanted to give you backup for what I was going to say. So here's my question: who is the most important? Who other than God is the most important figure in the Hebrew Bible, which might have to do with the ideas I've discussed so far, soul and behavior, and so on and so forth.
Moses.
Okay, we'll talk about Moses. I want
have
to
to
talk
give you
about
an
Moses,
SFP
but it's
answer.
not Moses.
Yeah, obviously.
I know. That's
Good
right.
guess.
I know.
Hillel?
I'm sorry?
Hillel?
Hillel. Hillel is not in the Hebrew Bible.
Abraham.
Nope.
The Jewish
nope,
people?
Nope. No.
One of the prophets?
Nope.
My favorite person is David, and I know he's not one of
Okay.
the...
Now, you said, well, your favorite person. I said, I hope I said, the figure in the Hebrew Bible. I don't know if I said person,
figure?
but I didn't necessarily mean
I don't
person.
remember actually.
The
I would say
figure.
person.
Okay, are you ready? To
not
me,
Moses.
the most important figure
God.
is...
No,
God.
you said
Aside from
not
God.
God.
Yes.
Let me guess. Wait a second.
Do you want to guess?
Jacob.
Think really broadly, and think of something that would be very surprising when I say it.
Israel, I don't know.
Okay, my answer is Satan.
Oh.
Satan.
Satan?
Satan. Satan.
Why do you think that?
I'm going to prove it to you.
What was
okay?
the question again?
My question is, for purposes of discussing souls and being all we can be, and our personalities and those sorts of things, who's the most important or relevant figure in the Hebrew Bible?
I don't
That's
think.
really interesting.
Is this your?
And I'm,
is
no,
this your
well, it's
point
my
of view?
opinion, but I'm going to put on my case.
Because he's the bad example of what you shouldn't be.
We'll see why. We'll see
Good
why.
idea.
Where? Because today's Torah portion talks about remembering Haman, remembering Haman, remembering what's his name, Amalek.
Amalek.
Amalek, the
Right,
evil,
it's-
the evil,
Yes.
the evil forces
Right.
of the world.
Right. Okay.
My
Marilyn,
question
go ahead.
is, except for the book of Job, where does Satan appear in the Bible?
Thank you for answering that question. Here's your answer.
On these pieces of paper.
Yeah. Okay, so I prepared a handout.
Thank
How many do we have?
Is this
We
the
have
Satan
enough.
handout?
This is
I
the
know,
yeah.
this
is the
It's
Satan
called
handout.
Satan and anyone who is watching or listening, if you would like a copy of this handout, please email me at rabbiartlevine at gmail.com. So the name of this handout is Satan and Sin in the Hebrew Bible. Do we have enough?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Is
this
this you?
this is is this me?
The green man.
This is all the texts in the Tanakh that talk about Satan. And so you'll see at the top. Don't read it. We're gonna go through them quickly. But at the top, I found this little image of the good and bad angel, which we in popular culture, the bad one is depicted as the devil, and I'm here to tell you that that's not what Satan means in Judaism. Okay, and I'm going to prove it by these texts, and then we'll see why this is all relevant. Okay, so let's go through these. I'll read the Hebrew first, and then the English. So part of our practice should be, I think, to struggle a little bit with the Hebrew to the extent we need to. Okay, so the first time that Satan appears in Torah, it is actually in Torah, not just in the book of Job, is in Numbers, and the citation says, "Vayichar af Elohim ki holech hu vayit yatsev malach Adonai baderech lesatan lo." Marilyn, would you read the English?
But God's anger flared up because he, Balaam, was going. So God's messenger stationed himself in the way as adversary to him.
But English doesn't mention Satan.
It says adversary.
It says adversary.
Okay, but
Okay, so the question is,
Satan a person?
well, that's okay. So Satan is not in this verse the name of a person. It's something.
Adversary.
Okay,
Right.
and it's usually translated in Jewishly as adversary. Okay. And if you remember the story of Balaam and Balak, Balaam was a non-Jewish prophet who was hired by Balak to put a curse on the Jewish people. And Balaam got on his donkey and was going to fulfill his mission, and an angel or a man or something appeared before him with the sword, and the donkey stopped, and Balaam beat the donkey 3 times, and finally the donkey talked and said, "Why are you beating me?" Okay, that's and let's go to the second verse, which is also from this story. Vayomer elav malach Adonai alma hikita et atoncha ze shalosh regalim hine anochi yatzati lesatan ki yarat haderech lenegdi. Carol, would you read the English, please?
I can't, I have food in my mouth.
Okay, Karen.
The angel of the Lord said to him, Why have you beaten your ass these 3 times? It is I who came out as adversary, for the errand is obnoxious to me.
And I said the precise meaning of the word here, yarat. The translators say we don't know exactly what that means, but apparently, but the angel is saying, I came out to stop you from doing this thing. Okay, and so the idea of adversary as somebody who is interposing to prevent something from happening. Okay.
But in these 2 cases, it distinctly says that adversary was a messenger of God.
Okay.
An angel of God.
Okay. All right. So doesn't that mean then that if the malach, if the Satan was an angel of God, then don't we draw from that the Satan is not an adversary of God? God, the Satan is God's agent or God's messenger. Is fulfilling God's will.
God's appointed
God's
messenger.
appointed messenger. Okay. So whatever this adversarial idea is, it isn't God's adversary, or at least it isn't an actor independent of God. It's some kind of adversary, but not in opposition to or independent of God. That's a crucial distinction. I mean, I don't know much about Christian theology, but to my understanding, may be wrong, that the devil or Satan is somehow a fallen angel who's opposite
Right,
God,
that's
and
right,
okay,
right.
that's
Right.
not the Jewish. So Satan is a fundamentally Jewish concept in Torah,
Messenger.
but not a messenger of God, which has something to do with being an adversary, but not not the Christian concept. Okay, no?
When I was in Israel, I took a lot of these kind of classes, and there they talked about something called the Yetzer Hara.
Okay, we're gonna
Oh,
get to
that's
that.
the two parts
We're gonna get to that. The
of it.
Yetzer, the
The
Yetzer
good part,
Hara.
the bad part.
Okay, very good. And that's a key concept. So let's
That's
hold that
right.
thought,
Yeah.
and we'll get there.
Rashi's daughter, Maggie Anton, really was into that.
Okay.
Did you read that? Yeah.
All right. So we'll move on. So in the first book of Samuel, we have another reference, and I'm trying to get a sense so we can get consensus on what this means. Okay. Vayikzefu alav Sarai, Philistine, vayomru lo Sarai, Philistim, chashev et ha'ish v'yashov el mekomo asher hifkadto, sham v'lo yared imanu ba'milchama v'lo yiyeh lanu lesatan ba'milchama. Okay, Marilyn, you want to read the English there?
But the Philistine officers were angry with him, Ashish, and the Philistine officers said to him, "Send the men, David, back. Let him go back up the place you assigned him. He shall not march down with us to the battle, or else he may become as adversary to us in battle."
Okay, so you may remember, may not remember, that King David, when he was opposing Saul, and before he became king, fought with the Philistines. And so this is an instance in which Achish, who was a close confidant of David, supported him to fight a battle, and the Philistines, however, were wary of him and said, he can't fight with us in the front lines because he might become an adversary, our adversary at some point. Okay, the Satan. In the second book of Samuel, Vayomer David, Mali valechem b'nei tzeruya ki tihiyu li chayam lesatan hayom. Mel?
David said, "What has this to do with you, sons of Zeruiah, that you should be to me as an adversary today?"
Okay, so this had to do with David and the death of Absalom, and David coming back as king, and the people who had supported Absalom, one of them, the sons of Zeruiah, came and said, basically, we didn't mean it, we always supported you, don't kill us. and then they said some other people should be killed. And so David got upset at them and basically said, "Butt out, this isn't any of your business." Another translation I've seen said, "Why do you cross me today?" Okay, so it's still the adversary idea. Why are you a thorn in my side, if you will? Okay, then in the book of those were that was referenced in the book of First and Second Book of Samuel. Let's move on to the book of Kings. Ata yadata et David avi ki lo yachol livnot bayit l'shem Adonai Elochav mipnei hamilchama asher sevavihu ad tet Adonai otam tachat kafot raglav v'ata cheniach Adonai Elohai li misaviv ein satan ve'ein pega ra. Richard, do you want to take that one?
You know that my father David could not build a house for the name of the Lord his God because of the enemies that encompassed him until the Lord had placed him under the soles of his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me respite all around. There is no adversary and no mischance.
Okay, and then the next verse, Solomon says, "And now I'm going to build, and therefore I'm going to build the temple now." Okay, so he's explaining why his father couldn't build the temple, but he was busy fighting. But God has given Solomon peace. There are no enemies nearby, and therefore now the temple can be built. So now this is not the reason I just want to give you a complete list, but I also want to point out that here Satan is a proper noun. Every place we've seen so far was list Satan, like as an adversary. Here it's just generic for some enemy or somebody who would threaten my peace or
opponent.
give me a problem. An opponent.
An opponent.
Okay, an
Because
opponent.
it seems to me that with the Philistine officers and the David, the sons of Tzuriah, and this one, that Satan is used as a synonym for opponent.
Okay.
And the same is true of the next three down.
Okay, and we don't need to read all the rest.
An opponent
but-
against Solomon.
And so, but let's read the last one simply because, as Marilyn started by saying, it's somewhere else other than the book of Job. So, in the book of Job, it's everywhere because the adversary, Satan, it really is a leading figure, if you will, especially in the beginning of the whole book of Job. So let's just read the English in that one. Barbara, you want to read that, please?
Why is it you who have fenced him round, him and his household, and all that he has? You have blessed his efforts so that his possessions spread out in the land. But lay you hand upon all that he has, and he will surely blaspheme you to your face. The Lord replied to the adversary, see all that he has in your power, only do not lay a hand on him.
Okay, so if you remember the story, this is where, at the beginning, Job has all these wonderful things, and the divine beings come before God, and Satan, and God says to Satan, "Hey, Satan, while you're doing your travels, did you see my servant Job? Isn't he wonderful?" And Satan says, "Well, that's only because you've blessed him with all these things. Take them all away, and you'll see he'll blaspheme you." And so God says, "Okay, I'll take you up on your claim. Go ahead, do whatever you want. Just don't hurt him. Just don't kill him," essentially. So, in addition to the fact that Satan is presented this way, again we see that God still has the ultimate authority here. God gave Satan plenty of rope, if you will, but laid down an important limitation. So that's why I hope you will agree with me, at least in our text, in our scripture, Satan is definitely a Jewish or a part of our tradition.
But I don't think it's the same as Satan.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree
Okay,
with Barbara.
so all right. So it's not the same Satan. What do you mean? As Christian?
Right.
Well,
right.
okay, but I'm all right. So, but there's a real. Okay, so now having said that, So what's the relevance of this? Okay, so the relevance, now let's talk about some basic Mussar study text. And we'll see
So we kind of.
why I started with
We
Satan.
tend to equate Satan with evil, so.
Okay, right. So the text that we read, Marilyn, for those of you who couldn't hear it on the internet or on the phone, Marilyn just said we tend to equate Satan with evil. And that is not how Satan is really viewed in Judaism. And we're going to talk about the Yetzer Hara in a moment. And even though literally Ra is evil, there's a famous story in which the rabbis, how did this go? I didn't look this up before, but they were able to capture the whatever, I don't know if it was an animal or a spirit or whatever, but they captured the Yetzer Hara. And they put him in a cage. Because after all, without evil in the world, all these so-called evil, then imagine how wonderful the world would be. Well, once they did that, nobody went to work, nobody created anything, nobody built anything. The world did not operate, and they had to let the Yetzer Hara go. And we learned from this story that it doesn't, the Yetzer Hara, which we'll talk about what that means, but it's not evil per se. But in our context, for our purpose of Mussar, what it does suggest is this opposition idea, which is not always. I mean, would you never want to have any opposing force in your life to make you stronger, better?
Grow. When I went through my divorce, which was a horrible thing, I found out how strong I was, and I learned a lot about myself. Not that I'm happy to be divorced, but it's akin to that almost.
Okay. So, or you could so that's a good example of a personal life, but even think about something like weightlifting or whatever. I mean, you have to have a resistance in order to make your muscles stronger, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a better idea in part about Yetzer Hara. But kind of jumping ahead, so let's look at this outline that I made up, which I call Mussar Introduction Study Text. And again, anybody who wants the copy of this, I'll be glad to email it. So these are some excerpts from Torah, and in one place from the Siddur that I'd like to talk about briefly. So let's go ahead and anybody want to read the Hebrew? The Hebrew here is a little easier than was it before. Okay. So, Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam, b'tzalmo, b'tzelem Elohim bara oto, zachar u'nekaveh. I'll just translate this as I go. And God created the man in His image, in the image of God. Image of God, God created him. Male and female, bara otam, created them. Vayvarech otam Elohim, and God blessed them. Vayomer lachem, and said to them, God said to them, Elohim, Pru urvu. Okay, go be fruitful and multiply. The first commandment in Torah. It's interesting, when I talk to rabbis, I say, why isn't there a blessing when we fulfill the first commandment of Pru urvu? Nobody's given me an answer to that yet. But anyway, umilo et haaretz, and fulfill the earth up. V'kiv sheha, and conquer it. Urdu bigat hayam, and sort of subdue the fish in the sea. Uv of hashamayim, the birds in the heavens. Uv'chol chaya haromeshet al haaretz, and all the creepy crawly things on the earth. Okay, so I put that in here because this presents an image of Adam as a conqueror. We are supposed to go out and dominate and subdue everything else, all the fish, the birds, and everything on the earth. Okay, so that's one image of the creation of man. Now let's look at the next thing, which is from the second chapter of Genesis. Vayitzer Adonai Elohim and et ha'adam afar, and God fashioned the man from dust, min ha'adamah, from the earth. Vayipach ha'apav nishmat, and he blew into him a soul, chayim, living soul. Vayihi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, and the man was a living soul. We talked about nefesh, okay? Vayita Adonai Elohim, and God put him in Gan Be'eden, in a Garden of Eden, Mikedem, to the east, Vayisem Sham, and put him there, Et Ha'adam Asher Yatzar, and put the man who he had created there. And then a few verses later, Vayikach Adonai Elohim, and God, the God Adonai, put Et Ha'adam, the man, Vayinichehu Began Eden Le'avdo U'Shamra, and he put him there to work and to safeguard, or some translate as tend and till the soil. So here we have another concept of Adam, not as a dominating conqueror, but as a nurturing farmer. These are opposing concepts of the very same person. So we have, from the very first two chapters of Genesis, opposing views of the nature of people. And they're both part of us. Okay? So now let's go on to Cain and Abel. This is a little bit long in Hebrew, so let's just read the English. Marilyn, you want to take it?
And the man knew Chaya, Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man at Adonai. And she again bore his brother Hevel at Abel. And Hevel became a shepherd, but Cain became a farmer. Time passed, and Cain brought a fruit offering to Adonai. And Hevel also brought of the firstlings of his flock. And Adonai respected Hevel and his offering, but for Cain and for his offering he did not respect. Cain was very angry, and his face fell. And Adonai said to Cain, Why are you so upset? And why has your face fallen? Is it not thus? If you do good, there is uplift. But if you do not do right, sin couches at the door. Its urge is toward you, yet you can be its master.
I think I should have said crouches. Crouches at the door.
Wait.
Sin crouches at the door.
Its urge is toward
you, yet you can be its master. Okay.
Cain said to Hevel his brother, Then it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Hevel his brother and slew him.
Okay.
And I've always thought that God was really the one that was at fault in that family drama.
Okay.
Because of his favoritism as one brother over the other.
Okay. So what do we have in this story? We have the two brothers, and both bring their best offerings, or it's actually it's not clear. Let's see, is that clear in the translation? I think one brought the best offerings, and the other didn't necessarily. But in any event, so after this happened, as you point out, Marilyn, God favors Abel, and Cain feels totally upset about this. And then God says, "Why are you mad? If as long as you do the right thing, it'll be fine." And then he says, just in a second, Barbara, then he says, sin, if you don't do the right thing, sin crouches at the door, but you can be its master. Absolutely crucial sentiment for Judaism. We can master sin. But what happens here? Cain says to Abel, let's go out in the field. they apparently say something. The text is silent about what was said, but Cain murders Abel. So the commentators say, this terrible result. You've said, Marilyn, happened because God set it up, but at least we can say this was a result of Abel's initial feeling of why did he kill Abel? I mean, Abel didn't tell God, so far as we know, don't accept Cain's offering. So what impulse or feeling was it? Jealousy. Okay, so here we have an example of jealousy that leads to murder.
You can just imagine what Abel said to Cain. God like me, my offering and not yours,
But it doesn't say that Abel said anything.
That's true.
It said Cain was the one, as far as we know, that felt terribly jealous and enticed his brother out and then murdered him. Even though God in between had said, control your jealousy, control your bad feelings, and everything will work out okay for you.
Okay, I never thought about what Marilyn said, but it's making sense to me, because if God says to Cain, where is that? Why are you upset? Why? If you do good, there is uplift. So maybe he thought he was doing good with the offering he got that God rejected.
Okay, it could. Yeah, go ahead, Marilyn. Yeah.
This is kind of the point of Mussar. I mean, we have temptations all the time, and everybody's temptations, each one of our temptations is often different. We have to fight those temptations. I mean, maybe God was setting it up, but Cain failed the test. I went to a lecture this week at Cal State Fullerton, and the person who presented a poem by Robert Frost that was amazing and really fit in here really well. Does anybody know Fire and Ice?
I don't remember the words. Some say the world will be destroyed by
fire, and some say by
Robert
ice.
Frost poem.
Right.
What is it? I don't know anything about it.
You know what? I'm going to get it because
Okay, I don't know.
Please do.
it's amazing.
Please do.
What's wrong
Okay.
with that?
All right. Well, we'll. But okay. So I wanted to point out that it was the God. Maybe God, as Marilyn said, did set this up, and I think that yes, God did that. God has created these opposing forces and the emotions and so on. But at the same time, God, for whatever reason, liked this offering, not that offering, but said it's okay. Even though everything will still work out for you if you control your jealousy, if you will, and you have the ability to do that. But Cain didn't. Okay. So, all right. So now we go on to Genesis chapter 6. Vayar Adonai ki rabba ra'at ha'adam ba'aretz v'chol yetzer ha'mishavot libo rak ra kol hayom. Carol, you're still eating. Okay. Karen, you want to take that?
Okay. And
Thank you. I'll be eating.
pass me some food. And Adonai saw how great man's wickedness on earth was, and that every inclination of his thinking was only evil the whole day.
Okay.
That's like very sad to me, because there were 4 people. If you accept Adam and Eve and Cain, and there were 4 whole people in Eden, or where.
Well, by this time there were many people.
Oh, okay.
But the reason that this is relevant, I put this in here, is because it suggests, because after all we know there was the flood and then but there's no really indication in the Noah story what happened that human nature was changed. I mean, God wiped everybody out except for Noah and his family. But that didn't mean, and yes, Noah was righteous in his time, but I don't think it means that human nature changed. So, all right, so we have this sort of default idea in this Torah verse that, well, it says, every inclination is evil the whole day. Does that mean that mankind is evil? I don't think that's necessarily what it means, but it does seem to mean that if we don't control, and we don't control these impulses, sort of like what God was telling to Cain, then sin is always there crouching by the door, and we're always thinking about it. And if we don't manage it, we're in trouble.
Yeah, but I totally agree with that, because that's the role of parents, and when children are very little, they don't want to control it, they want what they really want, and then if they're
Still
not,
like
if
that.
they're not
How
taught,
does that change?
they'll grow up differently.
Yeah, two kind of analogies that I've heard are, one is that we are like a car, and over time our tires are going to get out of alignment. And if we do not realign them, we're going to run in a ditch. That's just the way cars are, and that's the way we are. Another one is we're always walking along a narrow ridge, and if we don't watch where we're walking, we'll slip and fall off. So this is idea that we can't just go through life and not apply constant correctives, or we'll go off a ditch or whatever. Okay, now here's one of my favorites actually from Talmud. Bara HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yetzer Hara Bara Lo Torah Chevlin. Who are we up to? Marilyn?
Marilyn.
The Holy One, blessed be He, created the evil impulse, and He created the Torah as its antidote.
Okay, so here's your Yetzer Hara, your evil impulse, which seems to be, at least I think it's this idea that we just saw in the previous verse about negative inclinations. I don't want to necessarily say evil yet. And so the idea, once again, is that we are inclined to follow our Yetzer Hara, our impulse. Yetzer Hara, our inclination not to do the right thing. And that's a purpose of mitzvot and Torah and Judaism, is to counteract that natural impulse. Okay, from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. Itzehu gibor hakovesh et yitzro shene'emar tov erech apayim mi gibor umshal berocho mi loched ir. Well?
Who is strong? He who subdues his personal inclination. As it is said in Proverbs 16:32.
Oh, thank you.
Better slow to anger than mighty, to master one's passions than conquer a city.
Okay, so we see that our ethical tradition says that, or suggests that we're always struggling with our Yetzer Hara. And the strong one is the one who's doesn't say eliminates it, because that's not possible. That's our nature, and that's our inclination. But if we're able to subdue it, that is the one who is strong. Better so than conquering a city. That's how difficult it is. And then the final thing on this handout. Now this comes from the Siddur, from Shachrit. And I'll say the Hebrew. V'yehi ratzon lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu, shetargilenu b'toratecha v'dabkenu b'mitzvotecha, v'al tivienu lo lidei chet, sin, v'lo lidei avera v'avon, v'lo lidei nisayon, v'lo lidei vizayon, v'al tashlet banu yetzer hara. So if you're right in there, in the Siddur, every day we're talking about our Yetzer Hara. V'harchikenu me'adam ra u'mehaver ra v'dabkenu b'yatzer hatov u'ma'asim tovim v'choch et yitzrenu v'hishtabed lach u'tenenu chayom v'chol yom l'chenu chesed rachamim be'enecha u'v'nei choroenu v'tigmelenu chasadim tovim baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim l'amo Yisrael v'yehi ratzon lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu shetatzilenu chayom v'chol yom me'azeh fanim u'me'azut panim me'adam ra u'mechaver ra u'mishachen ra u'mipaga ra u'misatan hamashchit midin kasha u'miba'al din kasha vein jehu vein v'rid u'vein no vein v'rid.
No, I swallowed wrong.
So let's, who are we up to, Richard?
Maybe you will
Hashem, yeah,
Hashem, our
right.
God, and the God of our ancestors, that you will custom us to study your Torah and attach us to your commandments. Do not bring us into the power of error, nor into the power of transgression and sin, nor into the power of challenge, nor into power of scorn. Let not the evil inclination dominate us. Distance us from an evil person and an evil companion. Attach us to the good inclination and to good deeds, and compel our evil inclination to be subservient to you. Grant us today and every day grace, kindness, and mercy in your eyes and in the eyes of all who see us, and bestow beneficent kindness upon us. Blessed are you, Adonai, who bestows beneficent kindness upon his people Israel. May it be your will, Adonai, our God, and the God of our forefathers, that you rescue me today and every day from brazen men and from brazenness, from an evil man, an evil companion, an evil neighbor, an evil mishap, the destructive spiritual impediment, a harsh trial, and a harsh opponent, whether he is a member of the covenant or whether he is not a member of the covenant.
Okay, so isn't it strange that, I don't know about you, but I never heard about Mussar, and I never really heard about, maybe I heard about the Yetzer Hara, or Yetzer Tov before rabbinical school, I honestly don't remember. But I don't think it's a prominent part of our, of our services or our Jewish discussions or whatever. And yet, here it is right in the Siddur where we're talking about evil inclination and the good inclination. I find this a very powerful prayer to say every day, because you go through in the morning and you're saying, I want to do the right thing today. Help me do the right thing. And then what is the translation of Satan? Actually, it's Satan Hamashchit, destructive spiritual impediment. I love that. Okay, that's the Jewish concept of Satan, really. Yetzer Hara, okay, is destructive spiritual impediment. So that what we're here, this workshop is going to be about how to try to live our lives by not letting our evil inclination dominate us and not having our lives be governed mostly unconsciously by destructive spiritual impediments, with the goal of elevating our souls and living more holy lives. But also, in a very practical way, more calmer, more enjoyable life, better relationships, and so on. So those are my two textual authorities, if you will, for this whole process. And I think it's a shame that it isn't more of a part of practical Judaism, if you will. Because for me, this is where all the esoteric stuff and saying the prayers and we learn, this is where it all comes down to what it really means to be a good Jew, is to try and be more holy people in the ways that we'll talk about.
Question?
Please.
Okay, I get hung up on nor into the power of transgression and sin. Now, how are we going to define transgression and sin? Because I certainly don't consider it to be sinful that I go out to a restaurant and have a wonderful, nice, medium rare cut of roast beef.
I agree.
Why
would you even
yeah,
think
why
it
would you
would be
even think
sinful?
that? I don't understand.
That makes it not kosher.
It's not kosher because the thing says, attach us to your commandments. Now, biblically kosher? Well, sure. It doesn't say anything about it just says don't boil the calf in its mother's milk. And from that sentence, the laws of kashrut have developed as fences around the Torah, and then there are fences around the fences and fences around the fences.
How do you feel about the commandment of not murder?
Okay, I feel very different about that because that is basic to the successful functioning of every human society, and in every human society there generally is some kind of a prohibition against murder within the in-group. not necessarily for
How-
directed
so,
towards
okay,
the out group,
let's talk.
but
So,
within
so
the
let's
in-group.
pick some. How about pursuing justice, or not standing idly by when your neighbor's blood is spilled? And I mean, all I'm really saying is, there are. I'm not. I don't want to feel that I have to defend every mitzvah in the Torah.
No,
Okay.
but
But the sentiment, isn't the sentiment fair that we could every morning say some kind of a prayer that we hope that our conduct today is not led into impropriety, unethical behavior as we define it, and as Jewish tradition would define it.
okay, I make a distinction between ethical behavior and the minutia of the laws of rabbinic Judaism.
Okay, well,
Thank
fine.
you. You said it.
Fine.
So right.
Then okay. So
But my understanding of Mussar is that it really has nothing, it doesn't deal with the minutia of Judaism at all, that actually you yourself define the areas that you want to change, that seem glaringly a problem to each and every individual. It's a very individual.
right.
Minutia is what
What
you
we will not
I
be
don't
dealing
think
with.
that has
In fact,
to
I don't think. Yeah, I agree.
I think
I mean,
that's
I do not mean to suggest that halakha is not also intended to elevate toward holiness. I think that is the purpose of it. However, that said, having read this entire book and studied Mussar for a number of years and read other texts, I don't remember anything in here about ritual.
No, it's
Okay,
very,
we're talking about, and this is sort of the next thing on my list here. We're talking about midot. Midot in Hebrew literally means measures, but we're talking about our traits, our character traits, and the idea in Jewish philosophy is that we all have every trait. No trait is inherently evil. For example, jealousy. Okay, well, jealousy is perfectly appropriate in some cases. If somebody is stealing your property that you worked very hard to get, or they, let's say, that's a better example might be, you worked very hard to get something and they got the same thing without working hard at all. Would you be resentful or jealous of them? Okay, well, I don't think that those feelings would necessarily be bad. The question is, as we'll find out, how are you going to act on that? And how do those feelings affect you?
Yeah.
And are you even aware that you are feeling that way? Those are the kinds of things. And are you reacting in appropriate circumstances? Maybe you shouldn't be resentful or jealous. Right now you might be if certain things happen, but after you've gone through the Mussar process for a period of time, you will be able to temper your feelings or evaluate them more objectively. Those are the kinds of things we'll be dealing with, not ritual halacha.
So the dietary laws come under ritual.
Yes, at least for our purposes. I mean, again, it might be useful to make a distinction here. That's not what we'll be talking about. We are talking about personal traits.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
patience versus impatience.
Right. So when you get the book,
New York.
there's a whole list. Alan
Generosity
Moranis.
versus
That's
lack
right.
of generosity.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So okay. So let's talk about it. When you want to change any behavior, what do you have to do?
Recognize the behavior.
Recognize that.
Good thought.
Okay.
That's true.
I thought you had
Okay.
You have
to.
to identify the behavior that you want to
Right.
change, yes.
And how do you do that?
Introspection.
I was just gonna say, self-examination.
Your mother tells you.
Or your mother,
your wife.
or yeah,
Or your children.
or lots of other
Definitely
ways.
the children.
But you're right. The first step is
Identify.
identifying. Yeah.
I journal a lot, and especially if something, sometimes if something is bothering me, so that could be something relating to this, and then I think more about it.
That's great because journaling is essential to what we'll be doing. In fact, I would like to ask you to all buy something, a cheap notebook, whatever you want, only for you. Never, no one else will see it unless you choose.
Like
Hear that, Barbara? No one else will read my journal.
That's good. That's very good.
Why'd you choose black?
I didn't choose it, as a matter of fact. I just asked my wife to pick up a notebook for me. And she
It was
picked
the
black.
cheapest. It was the cheapest one.
I see you bought yourself one too.
Did?
It was black. It must have been for you. Anyway, so okay, so and this we have you may have gone through the verse in Torah that says, "Circumcise the foreskin of your heart." You ever heard that
I've
one?
never missed that
Yes.
one.
Okay.
Where
And
does
so
it come from?
that comes from
Really?
Deuteronomy. I don't have
You're
the verse.
kidding.
I
Do
can
we
get that for
read
you.
that one?
Yeah. Circumcise the foreskin of your heart. So what does that mean?
I don't know.
It means
open.
remove the obstacles from more sensitive feelings.
What?
Remove obstacles to a more sensitive inner life.
To a more sensitive.
yeah.
So
To a
not be-
more
not be
sensitive
more-
inner life. In other words,
be
the
more
idea is
sensitive?
we go through life, our hearts are blocked.
Yeah.
And in this course, which I've identified as the first step, if we want to change behavior of identifying something, the first step in identifying is to self-awareness is to become more sensitive to things around us, to what we're feeling. Okay, and this is a phrase in Torah that relates to that. We are prompted by many things unconsciously, and which one could say is the lower sphere of existence. We're living on a lower plane. We're not even aware of our motivations and driving factors and so on.
Or is God doing that?
Is God? Well, I think we have
See,
free.
but
Well, according to
everybody
Judaism, we have free will. So, I mean, God maybe set up the
I
system.
guess the answer is no.
But yeah, so okay, so we're trying to move our souls into a more conscious upper realm of life.
As well as hierarchy.
So here's
Of human beings.
here's
Yes,
my
yes.
third handout.
That was always my favorite.
Doing for time, okay. 2:30, okay. This is, I did not make this handout up. This is one that was created by Rabbi Mordechai Finley, who is a teacher at the Academy for Jewish Religion in California. He teaches a lot of classes about not only spirituality, but cognitive psychology and sort of practical application of ideas. And the reason I'm passing this out now is if you would just skip over number 1 for the moment and go on to number 2. Once we identify our personal spiritual curriculum, which is the first step in Mussar, everybody's different in terms of, I said everybody has every trait. Some of us are strong in the positive side of certain ones, and some are not so strong, and but we differ. So, for example, I happen to know, feel free to disagree, Barbara, but I happen to know that I don't do so well with patience. Okay? It's one of the traits that I really need to work on. So that's part of my personal spiritual curriculum, and for you, maybe it's not an issue, or not as much of an issue. It's all an issue, to some extent, for everybody. So the idea of Mussar is, as we go through, is you will, through keeping your journal and being more aware, you will discover what your personal spiritual curriculum is, if you don't already know it, or it'll become more apparent to you. And then you'll be able to work on it. And how will you work on it? So that's why number 2 here. Who's reading? Barbara? Okay, please.
B, 2B.
It's 2A.
Have a conscious list of the virtues you want to acquire and the flaws you want to avoid.
Okay, so the first thing is to make your own list. Now, actually, what we're going to do, just because we're all fairly new to this, is this book, the text we're using, has 18, I think it's 18 chapters with different midot. The first
What are
one,
midot?
midot are measures or personality traits. Okay, and the first one that Marinus selects is humility. So the assignment for 2 weeks from now is to buy this book and read the chapter on humility, which is only 8 pages or whatever. And then if you are up to it, we'll talk about it more before we end today. But start your journal, and then 2 weeks from today we'll go through the chapter together. We'll talk about, to the extent you want, and we'll talk about the texts and the concepts, and to the extent you want to share anything that you discovered about yourself during this process about humility, then great, although you don't have to.
Everyday holiness.
Right, so the book is The Spiritual Path of Mussar, Everyday Holiness by Alan Marinus. You can also order this directly from the MussarInstitute.org website or Amazon or any
Is it
any
easy
bookstore.
to acquire or avoid a trait?
We all have them.
Is it easy to acquire one or
Well, you
avoid-
can't
or
acquire
avoid
them.
one?
You mean
You
bring it
can't
out
acquire
more?
them.
Yeah.
But
Well,
bring
you
it,
could
but
say,
you have the trait and you want to bring
a
it out.
conscious list of virtues you want to acquire or flaws you want to avoid.
Well, I think the idea is that as you go through the process, you become more aware, pardon me, for example, of the things that happened that day in your life if you write your journal before you go to sleep, which is the recommended approach.
How long are you supposed to write?
A few minutes, or it's just for you. Just you're not talking about if you want to write something long, fine. If you want to just jot down
Right.
quick notes, this thing happened today, just to remind you, that's fine too. There's no requirement here per se. But it does require, if you want to be successful. I mean, this is step 2 in the process, right? So we identification. Step 2 is to try to do something about your.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
What is
please.
my goal at Mussar?
Your-
To get virtuous?
That's right.
Really,
Yes,
that's
that's right.
my goal, is to
That's
get more
correct.
virtuous and to
And
get,
avoid
get,
flaw and
right,
reduce
right.
flaws.
To
Right.
become, I mean, if you want to be esoteric about it, I would
No, I'm
say
just trying to get my
to
goal
be
here.
a more holy soul. I mean, if that's our objective
I know
as
that
Jews.
Mussar is catching out of the Reform movement. I remember reading about it in Moment. Do you remember a few years ago about how a lot of the synagogues, whatever. I think it's yeah.
There was an issue. I've got the articles printed out.
I
Here's
know
one. Look
that.
at them. In one of the past issues, I have it written down in the
it's
course.
aren't the Orthodox really into it?
Well,
So, no, I mean,
I
no,
can't.
seriously,
I
though,
can't.
I think that they start. Is that correct?
I
How
think
did it
I
start?
think it is.
Yeah, I
And
think-
I think, isn't it in city,
Well-
Right, I think you're right.
Okay, a little bit of
Sorry,
quick.
Right. I mean, isn't,
Kabbalistic?
Well, okay. So a little history. Mussar, as a Jewish discipline, started over 1,000 years
right.
ago,
I knew.
and there are classic texts from that era.
I think it was a
With the
Hasidic.
back then.
Okay,
I mean,
1,000 years ago is the year approximately 1,000.
okay, so we had the traditional. I mean, what I call is traditional Judaism. We're not. I mean, remember, Orthodox is a new term. So is Reform, so is conservative.
The more observant Jews started it.
So it was a practice. It was a practice in Judaism, but it became modernized at the end of the 19th century with a rabbi named Israel Salanter in Lithuania, and he actually was a sort of an itinerant rabbi who taught this, and it caught on, and other classic texts were written. So for our purposes, let's say it's an old tradition, but it's really come into
Vogue?
our vogue. Okay, thank you. The last 150 years, 200 years, and as Barbara mentioned, some of you mentioned, it's come most recently into vogue in Reform circles in the last few years. And I have in the course
That's the
outline,
Reform
I
movement,
have
yeah.
the date of the Reform Judaism magazine that has all these articles. So if you wanted to,
reading it.
yeah, I think they're online.
Yeah.
It must be online because I printed them out.
Do you remember reading about it?
But
I
to,
don't think I did.
Yeah.
so the answer to your question is,
That's what
Yeah.
I heard about it.
Yeah,
and
that's when I
read
first heard
Pliny
about
Jacob's
yeah,
Son.
the ultimate purpose is to be better people. But it's not, I mean, it's also, if, just to pick one thing, okay, I mentioned patience, okay? That's one of the midot that we'll be talking about. Well, just one second, Barbara, I mean, I hope that it will, that's right. Who, me or you? You have no patience with me. You need to work on this too. Once I work on this, I think I'll be happier. I'll be calmer. I'll be able to cope better. So it's not just being a better person to be a better Jew. I mean, these are ways to be
Good life skill.
better, happier, more.
Okay,
Well, I can tell you from being a cancer patient that when you are actively fighting the disease, you are in a much better situation than after the fight's over and you're sitting and wondering the rest of your life, is it ever going to come back? Because you're involved in the process. So that's positive in and of itself.
because we were talking about humility, and I can see it functioning in one's personal life, but in one's professional life, there's where I have a drawback. Our daughter beat back a lawsuit by telling the party who was thinking of suing her husband that, and this is exactly what she said. She said, "I'm a Harvard-trained lawyer, and you won't find anyone to go up against me."
Okay, so
That lawsuit went away.
So let me
And
answer.
isn't that the opposite of humility?
Okay, so let me answer.
That's chutzpah.
Well, hold on. When you read the chapter, when we read the chapter, we will learn what Judaism means by humility. Now, and I'll let me two quick stories. First of all, we know, you may remember, that Moses was deemed to, our tradition says that Moses was the most humble person.
Right.
Now,
Yes.
can you be a great leader
Be humble?
and be the most humble person?
No, usually
Not if you define humility as being a wallflower. But that's
That's
not
what you
how
define.
Judaism
No, all
defines
these things are
humility.
what you define them as.
Humility means taking up the correct amount of space for the situation. No more than necessary and no less than necessary.
From a Jewish point of view, I thought it meant the opposite of arrogance. It's the opposite of arrogance, and an arrogant person is not open to learn new things. They're not open to see, to change. That's
It's what you define it as.
Well, the other
All these traits are what you
story
define it as.
is you may have heard this one, and I'll compress it. But the rabbis ask, why was the Second Temple destroyed by the Romans? And there are a number of other answers they give to that. But one of them is that there was actually it's interesting. There was Bar Kamza, you've heard the story, and something other Bar Kamza. They had very similar names. I forget the other name. And when a rich man invited his friend Bar Kamsa, he had an enemy with a similar name. He invited the friend to attend a banquet. The enemy mistakenly gets invited, comes to the door, he says, "What are you doing here? Get out." He says, "Let me stay. Don't embarrass me. I'll pay for the food. I'll pay for the whole banquet. Blah blah blah." No, no, no. Okay, so he is very incensed. He goes to the Romans and says, "The Jews are plotting against you, and to prove that that they will submit a defective sacrifice to you." And the story explains all this. But anyway, the Jews find out about this, and they go to the main rabbi and they say, "You've got to kill Bar Kamza," blah 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 blah. And he says, "No, I won't do that." And the result is the sacrifice is offered. The Romans are convinced that the Jews are plotting. They come in and okay. What's the point? The point is that this rabbi should have ordered the assassination of this guy, but he did not use his authority that he needed in that situation, and because he did not exert himself, he was too humble, too withdrawn, or whatever. Devastating results happened. So that's just another example, and we'll get much more into it when we read the chapter on humility. But it doesn't mean doesn't mean meek, right? Okay, so try not to prejudge what these things mean.
Where does that fit in with the Sanhedrin that ordered the capital punishment of one person every 50 years was known as a bloody Sanhedrin? How does that fit in with that story? Because he didn't listen to the other side of the story.
There are other stories. There are other stories. Okay, so we've got did I cut anybody off? Barbara, did you want to say something? It worked. No. Anyway, okay. So we've got the first step of self-identification. Then we have the journaling. Now, the journaling, in part, is not just to help our identification, but because if you want to change your behavior, you really have to keep track. I mean, for me personally, hope you've noticed, but 2 years ago, I weighed 40 pounds more.
I was thinking of Weight Watchers.
Now, right. Now, how did I lose the weight? Well, for a year and a half, I kept track of every single thing and point total that I ate.
I still do.
Okay?
I know that's
And I lost the 40 pounds over a year and a half.
It's very good.
At the end of the year and a half, I was pretty close to what I wanted, and I went off to Israel, and I took cruises, and I stopped. In 4 months, I gained 13 pounds back. It's astonishing.
without the journaling.
Now I'm.
Journaling.
It's been 2 months again, and and we keep track of things that are important to us: our taxes, the budget, whatever, right? Your number of hours, whatever it is, if it's important. And if we want, especially, if this is important, if it means something to you, and especially if you want something to change, you have to journal or keep track in some way. You can't just come to these sessions. I mean, there would be some benefit, hopefully, but not like that. Then the third and most important thing, and the most unnatural probably, is what Barbara is doing with her therapy.
Brain retraining.
Exactly. Would you explain
Oh, God.
what that
I
means?
have a headache from it. I try and retrain
That's
my brain because I have an ear nerve damage in my ear. My nerve, anyway, 30% damage, so it's sending the wrong signals to my eyes. So I have to move my head in certain ways to retrain my brain. So my brain knows that the ear is lying to it.
Yeah.
So I know, yeah, it's very difficult. You get terrible headaches.
So the idea
Worse.
in Mussar, the idea, and this is the benefit of it being a 1,000-year-old practice because this is all tested. The idea is that, as I started out by saying earlier, many of our actions or our feelings, our impulses, our reactions are subconscious. We are driven by subconscious behavior. And it's, number one, it's much harder to change a subconscious impulse than a conscious impulse. If that's not a contradiction, a conscious impulse. And more importantly, if you want to change a subconscious behavior, you don't do it only or even at all by study. You do it by the things that have been proven to affect the subconscious. What are those things? They are things like meditation, like chanting verses, like shouting, I mean yelling, emotion. The subconscious is affected by emotion. So you generate emotion. Now, I'm not suggesting that we start this immediately because this is the hardest, most esoteric part of Mussar. But just to give you an example, one of the things, well, okay, so one of the things, when you get this book, you will see that at the beginning of each chapter, he has a little saying. And he explains that this is just my suggestion. You can do, pick one, pick a verse from it, or make something yourself up. It doesn't matter what it is, per se. All it matters is that it's related to the theme and that you get your verse or your whatever it is into your subconscious. You do that by repeating it, by putting it on a 3x5 card on your mirror, by saying it over and over, by singing it, by shouting it, in the shower. Something to get it into your subconscious.
I remember when I read the article, the thing, in fact, I actually did this for a while. I don't know if the word, but a very practical suggestion was have a physical reminder. Put a rubber band around your wrist to remember to have a conscious memory of what it is that you want to change. For instance, I'm not all that patient myself, and that was something I wanted to think before I spoke. I wanted to delay the amount of time that I reacted to things that. Okay, so the rubber band around the wrist or the finger was a physical reminder to count to 10, count to 20, whatever you need. Don't react right away. I found that very practical.
That you've raised a really important point about Mussar. One of the first things one of our first goals is just what you said. The idea, and this is something important for when you're keeping your journal. When something happens to you, when you hear about something, when somebody says something, we're trying to discover what triggers our first reaction, our first sort of awareness, because apparently we get a feeling, our emotion is the first thing that happens. It happens so fast that whenever we get stimuli, some kind of emotion is triggered. And one of the goals of Mussar is to be able to objectify that process and say, I realize that I'm feeling something. I'm having this reaction. And if you can separate the reaction from the consciousness of the reaction, then you're at the first stage of doing what you said, Marilyn, which is, well, now that I'm conscious that I'm having this reaction, I may be able to actually react from a place that I want to be, not from just my subconscious emotion.
Years ago, it must have been the mid-70s, transactional analysis was very popular.
That's right.
And I was in a group, one of my neighbors was going for her doctorate in psychology and she needed, for her thesis, we formed a group and did a lot of reading and met every week. And it was, they would say, what hooks you? Why do you react strongly to something? You're hooked. Not meaning in an addictive way, but just that it gets to you.
Yeah.
So I have to see if I have any of my old books.
Sounds familiar.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is the complete set of activities, if you work your way up to it, would be not just journaling, but the things that are necessary to to transform your subconscious, to recalibrate your emotions. And that's, studying the chapter and learning the text is important, but not the proven way of actually doing it. So it's a necessary but not sufficient way. And that's one of the reasons why I call this a workshop and not a class. Because if you really want to make a difference, you have to incorporate this into your life. Now, we talked about meditation, Barbara. He says in his book, 4 minutes a day as a minimum. I mean, you're not talking about a half an hour. Just going to a place where you can be quiet and clear your mind.
I used to do a lot of meditation. I studied yoga and I taught yoga years ago.
Great.
And it was the very Western. I did not want to do a Hindu type of thing. And when you start meditating, a very easy thing to do is just light a candle and stare at the flame and just keep thinking about looking at the flame, and that'll help you go quiet.
Okay, great.
It's
Yeah.
very hard to sit still.
Well, he talks about just focusing on your breath and trying to clear your thoughts. And you won't be successful because you'll be thinking about, I have to do this in 5 minutes, or I hear this noise out there. And so it says, just, be conscious of those and just sort of push them aside and go back to your breath. And then, something else will happen. Just push it. And this is it's an exercise to help clear your mind and be in a calmer place. And your idea of focusing on
and there's some nice breathing
candle,
techniques too, like an alternate breath. And you're thinking about breathing, and so it helps distract your mind from wandering.
And the in addition to clearing your mind, you're training your mind. Because you're training your mind to become conscious of your thoughts and your feeling, right? So you see why this helps? Because if your goal is to become aware of your reactions, you want to train your mind to pay attention to your thoughts and feelings. And so meditation is kind of clearing a space away so that you can focus on what your mind is thinking about.
And then you can give yourself suggestions. You can make a suggestion to yourself if you know what you want to accomplish or what your goal is.
We can all try to be silent for 4 minutes and just push. But you can. So I think we can wrap this up now unless you want to talk more. But you can see that it's a practice, and in fact, they say that the goal is to make your life Mussar work. Is to, for the rest of your life, you'll need to do this. Let's assume that in the first year, you make wonderful progress in being more patient. Let's say. Well, right now, what makes me impatient may be anybody that interrupts me. Okay, whatever. Did you want to say something, Barbara? But after I've done this for a year, then what may make me impatient is something at a higher spiritual plane. Maybe I'm impatient because somebody didn't take a full amount of time to study something. I'm not using a good example, but the idea is you continue to deal with all these traits, but the goal is to push the level of where you're having the problem into a higher spiritual plane. One example, I don't know how good it is, but for some people, if you are a thief and you are being pursued by the police, would you kill somebody to escape? Let's say that's the level of struggle that you're at in terms of will you kill somebody or not. Another person might be struggling with the issue of whether to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. Let's say, and when we read the chapter, we'll see that those can be the same trait, just at very different levels. So the goal is to be struggling with the same issue, because you will always struggle with the issue, but you will be at a more elevated plane, if that makes sense. Anyway, so much of this is all esoteric. Today was mostly esoteric. But once you start reading the chapters and you start experiencing it and journaling and maybe even reading some other texts, then it funnels together and we have the opportunity to see if it
Are the
works.
Mussar texts from 1,000 years ago similar to his? How did he get those traits? The same, like 1,000
his is a modern adaptation, and there are others. It's very accessible, and he mentions our sources. He'll draw from Pirkei Avot, or he'll draw from a story, or from Hasidic practice, or whatever, and he cites other sources. So it's not a heavy burden. As I say, the chapters are 6 to 10 pages. So the heart of it really, I think, is focusing you're taking 2 weeks. Actually, what he talks about is 1 week per trait, and then you go through them 4 times a year, each trait. But since we're meeting every 2 weeks, like that's our current model, say, all right, we'll take one trait and you'll work on it for 2 weeks. Ideally, and if it may be that we'll find out that's too much time and we can adjust it, or I don't know. But right now, we'll try. We'll take 2 weeks. We'll go to each trait. Every day, ideally, you'll pick a phrase, you'll say it in the morning, maybe you'll post it on just a screensaver on your computer, or put it in the shower or in the kitchen, or whatever you want. You'll try to think about it during the day, and at the end of the day, you'll say, now how today did that trait come up in my life? Try to be positive, because you don't want to beat yourself up. So it just happened, and today, this is how it was relevant in my life today. If you do it for 1 minute before you go to bed, fine. If you want to take longer, fine. This is for you. But I think if you do this, especially if you get the book, and you were telling me the portions of it are on the Mussar website.
I didn't look at this book. I looked at Climbing Jacob's Ladder, and there are substantial pages on Amazon that you can go ahead and read. Not the entire book. They don't allow them to do that.
Well, let's do this. I don't think I know him personally, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you order the book. Then tell me you've ordered it. I will photocopy the first chapter, and if you tell me you've ordered it, I'll email you the chapter, just so you'll have it the full 2 weeks or close to it.
I ordered it.
Humility,
Okay.
is that the first
That's the first.
chapter?
That's the first of the traits that he picks up. Okay, so you'll have the book. You can read the material, and then there are other materials, and certainly this is not the only one, but we're using this as our frame of reference. And then let's hope that in 2 weeks we'll have a lot to talk about. We'll go through the chapter together, and see how it came up in our lives. And you can tell me which text, or if you haven't used the one thing that
We'll be gone in 2 weeks. We're going to
And
be
you
in
won't be here because
Arizona.
you're going to bar mitzvah?
It's a bar mitzvah in 2 weeks.
All right. So then, do you want to try to have it on a Tuesday night? Let's say.
I can't
can't
do
do it.
Tuesday night. I took after a 27-mile drive home on Tuesdays.
Is there another night? Because we only. I hate to cancel it because then now it's once a month, and that's just so far.
People here in 2 weeks.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is there a week? Can we do it on a weeknight? Just that particular time. Does Monday night work?
Monday doesn't work.
Monday I work. Okay, I work Monday. I work Tuesday. We go hear Rabbi Eliezer on Wednesday. I work
Let
Thursday.
me
and
stop.
then there's Friday.
I'll get in start since we're into. And does anybody else want to say anything substantively before we
No.
just
No.
go into? Okay, all right. So
Basically, you're busy